Hi, history students. Here we are at Module 5, and today we're going to be listening to some Baroque music and some of the elements of the music that make that Baroque style. The first piece we're going to be listening to is what we heard at the introduction, which is Pachelbel's Canon. Pachelbel's Canon is the name commonly given to a canon by the German composer Johann Pachelbel, and it's from his Canon and Jig for 3 violins and basso continuo. Sometimes it's referred to Canon and Jig in D, or simply Canon in D, and it's really his most famous composition. It was originally scored for 3 violins and a basso continuo, and it's paired with a jig. Both movements are in the key of D major. This piece did not achieve popularity until many decades later. The canon really had remained forgotten for many centuries, just like other works by Pachelbel and other pre-1700 composers. The piece's chordal progression has been used in numerous commercial pop hits, particularly during the 1990s. In his lifetime, Pachelbel was renowned primarily for his organ and other keyboard music, whereas today he's also recognized as an important composer of church and chamber music. Little of his chamber music survives. However, the Canon and Jig in D major is one such piece. A single 19th century manuscript copy of this survives. The circumstances of the piece's composition are really unknown. One writer hypothesized that the canon may have been composed for Johann Christoph Bach's wedding on October 23, 1694, and it's known that Pachelbel did attend this wedding. Johann Christian Bach was the oldest brother of the famous Johann Sebastian Bach. He was also a pupil of Pachelbel. Pachelbel's canon combines the techniques of a canon and the ground bass. A canon is a polyphonic device in which several voices play the same music. They enter in sequence. In Pachelbel's piece, there are 3 voices engaged in the canon, but there's also a 4th voice, which is the basso continuo, and that plays an independent part. A ground bass, or an ostinato, is an Italian word for obstinate or persistent. It's used for any rhythmic or melodic melody repeated for an extended period. In this case, we see this all through Pachelbel's canon, that ground bass or that ostinato. Now let's listen to Pachelbel's canon. See if you can hear that ostinato all through the composition. Also, listen for the entries of each of the violins as well. And now we'll listen to Pachelbel's canon. The harmonious blacksmith is a popular name of the final movement of Aran Variations by Handel, and it's suite number 5 in E major. And it's written for the harpsichord. Remember the harpsichord? This piece was not named by Handel. There may have been a number of explanations as to why this movement was called the harmonious blacksmith. The name was not given by Handel and was not recorded until early in the 19th century, when the movement became popular on its own. Interestingly, Handel's music remained popular in England continuously after his death. Let's listen to the harmonious blacksmith. next piece we're going to look at is the Concerto for Two Violins in D Major by Johann Sebastian Bach. This concerto has three parts. There's a vivace, there's a largo, and there's an allegro. There are two surviving violin concertos, and this concerto for two violins is one of them. It was written between 1717 and 1723, during the period of the composer's life when he was happiest, while he was in the service of Prince Leopold. Prince Leopold provided Bach with 18 talented musicians. That meant that the 6 Brandenburg concertos were also from this time frame. During his earlier years at Weimar, Bach had come to admire the Italian style of concerto as it was composed by Vivaldi. He had paid the Venetian master Vivaldi the tribute of transcribing a number of his many published violin concertos for solo keyboard, and he's also arranged a Vivaldi concerto for 4 violins as a concerto for 4 harpsichords. Although these transcripts show Bach rethinking idiomatic violin music in terms of the keyboard, when it came to his own violin concertos, the influence of the harpsichord, with its self-sufficient contrapuntal possibilities and quick, unsustained brightness, was entirely forgotten. Bach's violin concertos are not virtuistic showpieces as Vivaldi's tend to be, but are conceived completely and purely violinistic in its terms. With the need to display the skill of 2 soloists, Bach substantially reduces the orchestral contribution in this work. Once the extended opening tutti, which means all, has established the mood, the weight of the first movement falls upon the soloist in 2 long episodes, the tutti returning briefly both in the middle and at the end. The soloists also have the responsibility of opening the finale and again dominate that movement. Between these 2 outer movements lies one of Bach's greatest and most sublime creations, an eloquent duet of overlapping and imitative phrases punctuated on 4 occasions by a gentle downward 4-note fragment that each time seems to lead to an intensification of the point of the depth of feeling of this wonderful dialogue. Let's listen to this concerto. Samson is a 3-act oratorio by George Frederick Handel and is considered one of his finest dramatic works. It's usually performed as an oratorio in concert form, but on occasion it has been staged as an opera. This well-known aria, Let the Bright Seraphim, is often performed separately in concert. An oratorio is a large musical composition for orchestra, choir, and soloists. Like an opera, an oratorio includes the use of choir, soloists, ensembles, and various distinguishable characters, and it has arias. The premiere was given at Covent Garden in London on February 18th, 1743, with an incidental organ music, probably the recently completed Concerto in A major. The oratorio was a great success, leading to a total of 7 performances on its first season, the most in a single season of any of his oratorios. Samson retained its popularity throughout Handel's lifetime and has never fallen entirely out of favor since. let's just go over a few more terms that you're going to need to be comfortable with as we progress through this course. Word painting is also known as tone painting or text painting, is the musical technique of writing music that reflects the literal meaning of a song. For example, ascending scales would accompany lyrics about going up. Slow, dark music would accompany lyrics about death. You can find word painting in melody, in rhythm, or in harmonizations, or in harmony. Idiomatic writing means that you're writing for the specific technical capabilities of an instrument. For example, earlier in this module, when we were discussing how Bach wrote some of Vivaldi's music for the harpsichord, he was exploiting the sound and the technical capabilities of the harpsichord. That would be idiomatic writing. It's really the opposite of generic writing. Generic writing means that the music is for any instrument or a generic instrument. You're not really exploiting the individual sounds of that specific instrument. Baroque music welcomes for the first time that idiomatic writing for both instruments and for voice. Your assignment for this week is to complete the listening assignment found on page 20 in your text. Also, if you can add the definitions in the glossary that are found on page 10. And then once you've completed your work, if you could please send it to me. Remember, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm here to help you every step of the way. I hope you have a super duper week. Bye.